Hey everyone, and welcome back. You know how sometimes you stumble across an article and it really gets you thinking?
Absolutely.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today, this whole idea of Anglo-Protestantism and orthodoxy.
Yeah.
Like, how does our background, our upbringing, really kind of impact how we see and understand faith? It's all based on this piece you shared.
It's a fascinating area to explore,
Yeah.
especially for those who, maybe grew up in one tradition and find themselves drawn to another.
For sure. And it's like, have you ever noticed how, say, your taste in music, even the kind of art you like, often kind of reflects where you come from?
Yeah.
This article takes that same thought, that idea, and applies it to something way, way bigger, our entire worldview.
Yeah. Our Weltanschauung, as the article puts it, that framework, that set of beliefs and values we carry that shapes how we interpret literally everything around us.
Exactly. And what we're really digging into here is this whole concept of an Anglo-Protestant Weltanschauung, what that actually means,
Right.
and how that might, in turn, influence folks who convert to orthodoxy.
Yeah, absolutely. The article we're looking at, it brings up Sarah Riccardi-Swartz and her perspective on all this. She's concerned about converts from Anglo-Protestant backgrounds, suggesting that they might be bringing some of their, well, cultural baggage along with them.
Cultural baggage. It's a loaded term, right?
It is.
It really makes you stop and think, like, what exactly does that mean in this context? I mean, we all have baggage from somewhere.
Yeah.
But the piece digs into this idea that conversion, it's not about, like, erasing who you are, right?
Yeah.
It's more about discovering how what you already are, your predispositions, can find fulfillment, but within, a new framework.
Yeah, finding a new expression.
Yes. And
Right.
the author makes this really interesting comparison to early Christianity. So back then you had all these new converts coming from this very Greco-Roman worldview, right?
Right.
And they brought aspects of that, of their existing culture, into their new faith. And ultimately that enriched it, didn't diminish it.
It added to it.
Right. It added to it. So the argument here is that Anglo-Protestants, they also have something unique, something specific to offer. It's not just about, like, conforming, fitting in.
Assimilating.
Right. Assimilating, exactly. And that's where this whole Anglo-Protestant Weltanschauung thing comes back in. What are those characteristics, those unique things they bring, and how do those potentially play out, like in real life within orthodoxy?
Yeah, how do those tendencies manifest?
Exactly. So let's unpack that a bit because it's a big one.
Yeah.
The article uses some really interesting examples. One that stuck out to me was how the concept of original sin in Protestant theology
Yeah, interesting. Right.
might have actually influenced how we think about things like white guilt in secular society today, like
Yeah.
that connection.
That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it like that, how a theological concept can evolve and take on new meaning, new life in a different cultural context.
Totally. But how does that evolution you're talking about, how does that tie back into orthodoxy? What are some of the other, maybe less obvious characteristics of this Anglo-Protestant Weltanschauung, and how might those play out specifically for converts?
Yeah, that's the key question. Well, if we take a step back and look at Protestantism historically, there's always been this massive emphasis on individualism,
That's awesome. Okay.
on
Yeah.
individual conscience.
Yeah.
Stemming from the idea that each person has this direct line to God without necessarily needing a priest as an intermediary.
Interesting. Okay.
Which, if you think about it, kind of contrasts with the Orthodox emphasis on the church as this, like, mystical body of Christ.
So you're saying there's potentially, like, a clash of worldviews at play here?
Not necessarily a clash, but definitely a point of tension, for sure. A real opportunity for dialogue.
Yeah.
And the article really emphasizes that. Understanding this inherent tension, this sort of push and pull, is super crucial for both converts and for the Orthodox Church as a whole.
It's interesting to bring that up, individualism, because it's something the article really digs into as well. Like, it keeps coming up.
Yeah, it's definitely a key facet, a major part of this whole Anglo-Protestant Weltanschauung we're trying to unpack. Like this idea, this deep-seated belief that individuals, they have not just the right, but the responsibility to, like, interpret Scripture for themselves,
Okay.
to question authority, not just blindly accept,
Right.
and to really push for social reform to make the world a better place.
Which, now that you mention it, it totally makes me think about the Protestant Reformation itself.
Oh,
absolutely,
yeah.
Like, the whole thing was sparked by individuals saying, hey, wait a minute, we're not okay with this, challenging that whole established order, that power structure of the Catholic Church.
Exactly. And that spirit, that, I don't know, that energy of questioning, of challenging dogma, it's like it's woven into, like, the very fabric of how Anglo-Protestants think, even now.
I get that.
Now, whether that translates smoothly, neatly into an Orthodox context,
Right, that's the question, isn't it?
that's a whole other can of worms, right?
Yeah, because orthodoxy, at least how I understand it, it really places a high value on tradition,
Yeah.
on what the church fathers have said and taught. So that right there, that emphasis, that focus, that feels like it could be a potential, I don't know, not a clash, but maybe a sticking point.
A point of friction, absolutely.
Mhm.
And you know what? The article doesn't shy away from that one bit. It really digs into it,
Huh.
raises the question of whether those I don't know what else to call them, but like those ingrained tendencies
Mm,
toward individualism
right.
might actually lead to, if not a straight up rejection, but maybe a misinterpretation, a misunderstanding of certain Orthodox teachings
Mhm.
or even practices, the way things are done.
Yeah, 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 I can see that. But then, I mean, flipping it around, do you think, is there a way where those same tendencies, that questioning, that drive to, like you said, make things better, could those actually be a source of strength within Orthodoxy?
That is the million-dollar question, right? That's what we're really wrestling with here. And the article, at least how I read it, it seems to suggest that, for example, this very Anglo-Protestant drive, this passion for social justice, there's potential there for it to find a really powerful expression within orthodoxies, already deep commitment to like philanthropy, to caring for those on the Balkans. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's almost like we're talking about less about conflict and more about, I don't know, finding ways to bridge these two worldviews, these two lenses for looking at the world, and seeing how they might actually complement each other. Not erase, not overpower, but complement.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not about saying, okay, you were this thing, now you have to become this totally other thing. It's about recognizing that whatever your background is, you bring these unique gifts to the table. And maybe it's about figuring out how those gifts, those tendencies, how they can best serve this new path you're on.
And the article uses that example
Oh,
with Dr. Taylor Marshall.
Dr. Taylor Marshall, right, right.
So for anyone who's not familiar, he's a former Protestant minister who converted to Catholicism.
Right.
And now he's a, like, I don't know if prominent is the right word, but he's a voice. He's out there talking about traditionalist Catholic stuff.
He's a figure, yeah.
Yeah.
A personality,
Right.
and whether you agree with everything he says.
Right.
He's definitely got strong opinions,
Mm-hmm.
but the article, they use him as an example of how those very, like we keep saying it, but those deep-seated, those ingrained Protestant tendencies, that worldview, in his case, like a really strong, adherence to what he sees as traditional Christianity,
Yeah.
how that can continue to shape how you see the world, how you approach your faith, even after you've technically converted, right?
Yeah. It's like those core values, those just fundamental ways you see and interpret the world, they don't just vanish overnight.
Nope.
It's more like they evolve. They find new ways of expressing themselves.
Precisely. And it's through really understanding those underlying values, those invisible threads that connect our past to our present. It's only then that we can really begin to grasp the sheer complexity of what it means, especially in this case for Anglo-Protestants, to enter the Orthodox world.
It's almost like, and maybe this is a weird way to put it, but it's almost like we're talking about two totally different languages of faith.
Oh, I like that.
Like each one, Anglo-Protestantism, Orthodoxy, it's like they have their own like grammar and vocabulary.
Yep. That's a great analogy. And just like learning any new language, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're coming from that Anglo-Protestant background, entering into the Orthodox world,
Mhm.
it's going to involve a process of translation for sure. Figuring out how to like express those deep down values and beliefs you already have, but in this new framework, it's still you, just
Yes.
different.
So, okay, if, like we were saying, if individualism, that strong sense of self, and that drive for social reform, if those are part of that core, that like Anglo-Protestant vocabulary, what does that translation process actually look like, in real life? How do those things actually play out?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. It's not always a clean, easy switch, right?
Right.
So let's take that individualism thing as an example, right? Within Orthodoxy, there's this huge emphasis on community, on the idea of synergy, this beautiful word that basically means working together for everyone's salvation. It's not just about you, it's about everyone around you too.
Okay, I get that. But then how does that individualistic mindset, that I got to do my own thing kind of spirit, how does that find its place in a faith, in a tradition that's so focused on community, on not just you, but everyone?
Well, imagine it like this. that really strong sense of personal conviction
Hmm.
that drive Anglo-Protestants often have to really live out their faith in a real, authentic way
Yeah.
that could translate into like this really deep commitment to personal spiritual growth. But, and this is key, within the context of the church community.
So it's not about ditching that whole I'm responsible for myself thing, but more like aiming it, channeling it towards something bigger.
Exactly. It's recognizing that your individual transformation,
Mm.
your own personal journey, it's not meant to just stay with you, you know? It's meant to ultimately serve everyone, to contribute to building up the church as a whole. Your growth helps everyone grow.
You like that. Okay, what about that other big one we keep coming back to? Social reform. I mean, that's huge, especially in Anglo-Protestant history, like that desire to make the world a better, more just place.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a powerful thing, that passion. And within Orthodoxy, that energy, that desire to see change, to fight for justice, it could find a really natural outlet through philanthropy, for example,
Mm.
through, acts of charity, acts of service to the poor and marginalized, all those things. Orthodoxy really values and encourages.
So again, it's about finding those places where those values you already have, they can like connect with, like align with the practices and the teachings that are already there within Orthodoxy.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that sometimes, actually a lot of the time, the seeds of real, lasting social change, they're sown through individual acts of love, of compassion, which, if you really think about it, that resonates so deeply with how Orthodoxy understands what it means to live a truly Christian life.
This whole conversation, this whole deep dive, it's really been eye-opening. It's like instead of seeing these two traditions, these two ways of being Christian as like totally separate things, like oil and water, we're starting to see, at least I am, the potential for real dialogue, for them to actually learn from each other, maybe even, like you said, enrich each other.
And honestly, that's exactly what I hope people take away from that article, from our conversation today, that we can move past these like simplistic ways of thinking, these either-or boxes, and really embrace the incredible richness, the complexity, yeah, the beauty of faith journeys, like those of so many Anglo-Protestants who find themselves drawn to Orthodoxy. It's more common than people realize, and there's so much we can all learn from these experiences.
It's a good reminder that where we come from, how we were raised, our backgrounds, they don't have to be these barriers to spiritual growth.
No, not at all.
In fact, if we look at them the right way, they can be incredible assets. You know, they can give us this whole different perspective, this different way of understanding and experiencing, faith, whatever that means for each of us.
Beautifully put. It's about recognizing that within every single tradition, within every single person, really, there are these unique gifts, these unique perspectives just waiting to be like uncovered and shared and celebrated. And who knows, maybe in the sharing, we all grow a little bit closer to whatever it is we're searching for,
Yeah.
to that deeper understanding, that deeper connection.
I love that thought. To everyone listening, we'd love to hear from you. What really resonated with you about this idea of like this Anglo-Protestant worldview encountering orthodoxy? What kind of like translations have you noticed, maybe in your own life, maybe in the lives of people you know? Until next time, keep exploring, keep those questions coming, and keep diving deeper.